Welcome to Pharma Source, recorded at CDMO Live 2025. This episode is brought to you by Qualifies, the platform that helps life science teams streamline audits and predict site risks with AI-driven insights.
Good morning. Our next session, we're going to be talking about digital manufacturing networks in the real world and how to transform CDMO partnerships through data and AI, sponsored by Aizon. We have Dave O'Gara, pharmaceutical business consultant who works with Aizon, Franziskus Kath, who is founder of Kath-Consulting and will also be sharing some of his experiences as Vice President of Emerging Technology for QA at Johnson & Johnson. Really interesting case studies and perspectives for J&J, who are arguably one of the leaders, I think, when it comes to digitization of their networks. We've got Vishnu Dwazi, Director of Life Sciences at West Monroe, who can also draw on his experience working within CDMOs as well, from his time at Catalent, Biojura, PII. And we're also joined by Stephen Sheehan, Director of External Manufacturing and Development at Alchemez. To begin with, I'd like to ask each of you to give a quick introduction to yourself, please, and what your thoughts are on the state of digital.
Thanks very much. Dave O'Gara, I'm more than 30 years at Big Pharma, Novartis, 10 years in manufacturing, and the last 20 years in managing the supply network for API manufacturing for Novartis small molecule globally. So now I'm supporting Aizon in interacting with CMOs, CDMOs on their digital journey. That's a brief introduction.
Yep.
The second part?
And the second part was, what would you say the current state is of digitalization within pharma manufacturing compared to other industries?
Okay, so if we take the most mature, you're talking automation, aerospace, they've been at it for 10, 15 years for quality evaluation, robotics. All of these aspects are very well defined. When you move into pharma and you segregate into big pharma, they have digital strategies. All big pharma have digital strategies. We saw earlier today on major expansions and plants in the US especially. All of those major investments have a digital strategy connected with it. When you move down to mid-sized pharma, there are pockets of activities and experiences in the application of digital and AI. And then when we move into the AI space, or not in the AI space, CDMO, CMO space, again, that's segregated between the larger CMOs, CDMOs, where digital and AI is being implemented and it's active. Many of these are some legacy plants from big pharma. And then you move into the mid-range CDMOs and smaller CDMOs, it's not so active. And I think we saw that probably from our discussions in some of the roundtables yesterday, where it was clear that it's a thought and there's probably a barrier in terms of how we get there. So for the people that are in the room, I would say it's a massive opportunity for mid-size, if you're not already in the digital AI space. It's a massive opportunity in terms of competitiveness, and we'll talk more about that. It's, in my view, it's a currency. It's not if, it's when. I think the journey starts. If you're not on it, the journey should start now.
Stephen, it'd be good to understand a bit more about your role, please, and also following up from what Dave was talking about, the state of digital amongst the manufacturers that you work with.
So Stephen Sheehan is my name. I'm a director in external development and manufacturing. I've been with Alchemez for 11 years. I'm responsible for managing our external network, our CDMOs, during the development phase, at which point then when it becomes a commercial product, I hand it over to our external operations division. So for me, maybe just to answer that question in terms of what is the state of digitalization with our CDMOs, maybe if I just take a step back and say, I think pharma companies push what's important to them onto the CDMOs. So for us in Alchemez, the advent of AI and all the discussions about AI is driving us now to to create this digital strategy. So right now in Alkermes, we're looking at a data maturity assessment. So across various different divisions within Alkermes, we're looking at baselining, where are we at in terms of data maturity, and then when we know our baseline, then it's really a discussion around where do we want to go and what are the technologies that we want to go after. So we're there in terms of data maturity from an Alkermes perspective. There's so many different things you can go after, and that's us in terms of Alkermes. And then from a CDMO perspective, we're not there yet in terms of digitalization and data. We are getting there. We have a network strategy, and we are working with them to increase the digitalization. But I suppose we look inward first, and then once we've that kind of sorted, then we start looking at our CDMO network, I would say.
Great. Thank you. Franziskus, if you could give a brief intro to your experience, please, in this area, and given your work at J&J and in like cross-industry initiatives, be interested to have your perspective on who you say is leading the way when it comes to digitalization within pharma.
Yeah, within pharma.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so Franziskus Kath, I was 26 years at J&J until the end of last year in various functions from R&D, supply chain, quality operations, and about 10 years really managing suppliers and external manufacturers across pharma and consumer. In the last 4 years, I was coordinating the digital transformation for the quality organization across pharma. And since January, I'm independent and really supporting CDMOs, because I'm passionate about that relationship between CDMOs and multinationals, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to further improve, right? That's also where I see the opportunity is when you look to those issues which we have on a day-to-day basis, like inefficiencies, speed, misunderstandings, effectiveness, and so on. I think there's a lot of opportunity to use digital technology to create the transparency, and we heard yesterday in the roundtable some really good examples on why this is important and how it can generate a lot of value. It's not easy to get there, it's some steps to take, but the payback is dramatic, right, for the supply chains. In terms of the second questions, where I think leading the industry, I think we heard it to some extent. The larger the companies, the more digital is already there. And indeed, most of them have been for the past, I would say, 8 to 10 years, really tackling the topic to really process this internally. But now you see, and really the top players are, you can name basically all the big 20. Among the big 20, I would probably point out like Roche has been showing up, Bayer, Novartis, and they have been showing up in surveys as being probably leading in the industry, but that can change also daily, right? Some interesting examples are maybe those companies, smaller companies, which are young companies and started as digital natives. So I think 2 examples, maybe BioNTech and Moderna. I think they could benefit a lot from their digital agility during the pandemic. I guess that helped them really to respond very, very quickly. And there's some interesting videos you can Google even on how Moderna, for example, is organizing their digital stack, basically to have a free flow of data across the entire digital stack. So when you go down then from the size, I think the more it becomes complex, not yet the priority and so on, but the big ones are the ones which I named.
Great, thank you. And Vishnu, can you give a brief introduction to yourself, please? And from your perspective, working across various different companies, advising CDMOs as well, where do you see digital playing at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. Good morning, everyone. Vishnu Dwadasi, Director in Life Sciences at West Monroe. We're a digital consulting firm, and I had the opportunity to work on the CDMO side as well as consulting, even on the sponsor side as well. I think the major challenge in the CDMO sector is there's a very level of digital maturity across all these organizations, small and large. And a lot of these companies are starting their digital transformation journey, but that's a major effort across the organization, right? It requires upfront investment, strategy of your data, taking people out of the business, right out of revenue generating work to help implement these different systems. And what we see a lot is, companies just don't have that mindset or culture to actually implement these systems. Or if they even purchase these systems, they're implemented in, not the best or optimal way to actually be effective to integrate with systems for a sponsor or for large pharma. So I think there's just a lot of work that needs to be done within the CDMO sector, especially since a lot of companies are still very manual. So they have to move from paper to digital, and then digital to eventually leveraging analytics and AI. So there's definitely a journey that needs to be taken, and it's going to take some time for the CDMO sector to actually get to a point where they can integrate with their clients.
Great, thank you. Dave, you mentioned that there's a gap in terms of how much of a priority manufacturers are putting on digital, certainly compared to how the sponsors are prioritizing it. What would you say the business case is for digital integration between sponsor and CDMO? And are there any examples where a lack of digital connectivity is causing problems? Yeah,
we spoke yesterday a lot, and a lot of the discussions and quality discussions were on about a theme was transparency, feedback, lack of information, communication. So that whole area of connectivity in terms of where the CMO is at in terms of batch manufacturing, how they can integrate with the sponsor, that whole area creates value. But for me, I'm conscious of a lot of people in the room, mid-sized CMOs, CDMOs, you need to see the value of the activity in a reasonably quick journey, a quick period of time. You don't want to go on a digital journey and not see the return on that investment in a reasonable time frame. So specific examples that have been mentioned, and projects that I've been personally involved with CMOs on yield improvement. So projects like, for example, a simple yield improvement. It sounds simple, but a yield is an incredible amount of value in API manufacturing or biologics manufacturing. And using a relatively straightforward digital implementation just on that piece of a synthesis in terms of ingestion of raw material data from LIMS, in terms of connecting to DCS, to any other manufacturing systems, all IPCs, all data, consolidating that data in a data lake, interpreting and analyzing that data to give you insights and outputs that really can create value. And in some of the cases that I've been involved in, this value has been demonstrated in less than 100 days in terms of project start, team aggregation, data collection, data evaluation, output recommendation, and then implementation for further improvements. So we have cases with Grifols, with Thermo Fisher, with many of the larger and smaller. We have a case with Record Data, where they implemented on a generic API that they've been producing, and this is in the public domain, I'm not giving anything away here, an API that they've been producing for many years, a project on yield optimization, where they extracted an additional 1.5% of yield on a fairly large volume but important generic API. The ROI on that was multiple quantities. Now, they didn't implement a big digital strategy. They went after a problem statement and used a digital tool to affect a result that really impacted on their business. So, I mean, it's a message I would just like to get out to the CMOs and smaller CMOs. Don't be afraid of this. We're talking about it, it's on our agenda, it's coming down. My advice would be to jump into this space with an area of your business where you think there's a value opportunity. Discuss with your sponsor. We have cases that the sponsor has actually supported the implementation of a digital solution with the CMO, because the benefit was going to be benefit shared. So that's sort of, I probably drifted into some other aspects there, but I think they're important aspects, considering the people in the room. On your question that you asked, we all have cases if you're involved in managing CMOs, where you have a product that you have lack of transparency, things go wrong, the supplier of your supplier's supplier changes something, and the next time you see a problem is when it's up at N-1 and nobody can do anything. And is it the CMO's fault? Is it the sponsor's fault because the process wasn't defined? You're into all these discussions. I'm convinced that with a digital evaluation of your supply chain, a lot of these items could be eliminated.
Thank you. Franziskus, at the roundtable yesterday, you were talking about J&J's journey towards digital integration, with Stefan, also from J&J. How have digital twins helped in that journey? Are there any sort of key takeaways you could share from that project?
Yeah, I think Stefan made a couple of very good points there at the roundtable, and I would highlight a few. Like, if I think of the issues we sometimes have to manage, like larger disruption, and just in general how we manage relationship with vendors. Oftentimes you come into a meeting and you first need to sort out what is actually the kind of data we're looking at. Do we have the same interpretation? If you are integrated, you all look at the same set of data, and there's total clarity when you come into the room. You really can go into the content, you know what data is there, and so on. So that's one big advantage, of course, of just being integrated on the most critical data and having a predefined interpretation of these data. But the other one, which is really financial impact, is what was shared yesterday by Stefan, was there is visibility to real-time production data, right? And the experts then can see, hey, your pH is shifting away, so you need to go and feed your cells a little bit more, right? And that can save you weeks of manufacturing capacity. This is big dollars, what we're talking about, right? And I think this is for the benefit of both, the CDMO and the sponsor at the end, to avoid those kind of mistakes, identify early signals, and just preserve value, right? And what was shared there is a very significant implementation already with the key strategic suppliers, which has happened. And yeah, this is costly to implement it, but on the other hand, the payback definitely was there. That was the quote. And sorry, the reference that you asked for the digital twin, right? So if you have that golden badge as a reference, you very quickly see, hey, something is going off rail, and now I need to do an act, and my digital twin tells me what I have to do to correct the situation. So we are really talking in large molecule space, big money here, and big capacity constraints.
Thank you. Stephen.
Maybe just to come in a little bit on that. So on my left, we're talking about Johnson & Johnson, who invested millions and millions in their digital strategy. And then Dave was emphasizing that, I suppose, pick a project and go after something and implement something digitally. So I think there's definitely, for me, when we started looking into this a few years ago, there was a little bit of about, do we have to do everything all at once because we don't have the budget to do everything all at once? And then I know that's what Johnson & Johnson did. But just for us in Alkermes, and I'll maybe just use an example that we had. So we were working with a CDMO in the large molecule space this a few years ago, and it was during development activities. It was a large molecule drug substance CDMO. As you do in development activities, we ran into an issue. We had a batch failure. Because we were new to the large molecule space, we were using the CDMO's SharePoint. All the data was saved there, the minutes, the presentations, everything was saved there. So once we had the batch failure, immediately we went looking for the data, we went looking for the presentations, and it became clear pretty quickly that the CDMO wasn't doing a great job in terms of the organization of the SharePoint site, etc. And we lost weeks because we couldn't get the data, we couldn't find things, we couldn't get access to the SharePoint. So after we solved the issue and we got back on track, we took a step back and we thought we need to be a little bit more strategic about this, and we need to take responsibility in terms of how we interact with the CDMOs and owning our own data. So we took about 6 months to create this CDMO governance framework that we now use with all our CDMOs during development activities. I won't talk so much about that now, but I'll maybe talk about the digital aspect of that. So from the digital aspect, what we now do is we created an external SharePoint site and it's a templated SharePoint. So every time you move to a different project, it's the exact same. You've got your project strategy, your governance framework, an escalation pathway. It's all the exact same folder structures in terms of how you save everything. We use OneNote for meeting minutes, also for agenda tracker. Everything is hyperlinked, so you can automatically go to it. So now for us, and when we run into issues, the data is at your fingertips. You're owning the data, and if you move between projects or you go from drug substance to drug product, it's so much quicker and it's so much more efficient. Now, that was an example of something that didn't cost us a lot of money, right? It's our external SharePoint. It's just creating a template. It's creating a governance framework, and then it's rolling that out. So there is a halfway point between spending loads of money and just starting a project. So for us, that was the start of our CDMO digitalization aspect, but the benefits we've seen from that from an organizational perspective and just from taking responsibility to own your data so you know where everything is.
Thank you. All in a way from the sponsor perspective. So I'd like to go to you, please, Vishnu, to take it more from the CDMO's point of view. What concerns do you think they might have, or opportunities would they have about deeper digital integration with sponsors? And from looking out across the various different companies who you work with, do you think it's enough of an investment priority right now?
It needs to be a priority. I mean, to take a step back, I mean, the power is in the data. But in today's world, for a lot of these CDMO organizations, the data is in paper, it might be in System X, it might be in your ERP, it might be in your LIMS, it might be in your QMS. And if a sponsor is requesting metrics or data for a batch, that's high effort for the project manager or the operations lead to actually get that data together. By the time that data is sent to you, it's probably outdated, which is another challenge. So I think CDMOs need to really think about building that digital strategy. The data strategy is very important. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to invest $1 million in Salesforce, ERP, my LIMS, my QMS, my MES. We need to think about all those different systems, how they integrate, where that data goes into, and then that data lake needs to be reporting that's effective for your clients and internally, right? And then eventually that data can be shared with your client or your sponsor. But what we talked about right now is quite a big transformation for the business. So to their points, I think it's very important to say, hey, what's the priority here? What do we need to implement first? What metrics are critical for my organization? And then as you're building your data strategy, your digital roadmap, make sure you're including your business internally as well as your key accounts or clients to ensure that what you're putting together will be integrated in the target state with your sponsor's technology as well. So, in short, there's a long journey here. I think it's very important for the leadership team and IT folks to get together and really build that roadmap and really effectively execute against it. And things will change, but that'll really help kickstart your transformation journey.
Yeah, maybe if I could just come in there a little bit in terms of a digital roadmap, all very good, you need to have it. But I also think there's quick wins that CMOs can have. And I come back to the point I made about what's important at the end of the day is your batch production, your quality. And if I was a CEO or if I was a manager of a CMO plant, and the takeaway I'd probably like to, for a lot of you are in sales development, business development, but to bring back to your site heads is what's our most important revenue generating product, and to do an analysis on that product. Could we digitalize that product from raw material start, batch production to end output? And through that digitalization, can we get insights into the quality yields, and can that create value? And can I then share that with my sponsor? that can be done in a period of time that is not months. That can be done in a much shorter period of time. I just want to recreate the idea that digital is a big step change, but you can eat the elephant one piece at a time. And that piece that you eat first, if you can create real value out of it and show it in your organization that you've created value, you'll get adoption, very quick adoption, and you'll get the people aspects of it as well to come along on the journey, because the value will be transparent and the value will be seen. I'm very much against doing things because they're a trend. People will do this because it's a business imperative.
Stephen, how are you eating the elephant?
One piece at a time, as they say. I was just going to go back to one of the points that Vishnu made about having a digital strategy. And I think it's important to get the language correct in terms of how people are approaching this. I think every company has a business strategy, and I think it's important that digitalization is incorporated into the business strategy. Whereas if people start talking about a digital strategy, to me it seems like it's a little bit siloed at times. And I think really to get buy-in from an organization, it needs to be part of that business strategy, so it's been spoken at the right levels. You're probably saying the same thing, but I just think it's important about how it's incorporated, just to make sure that the business really focuses and it's important to the business. Because if you don't get senior leadership buy-in, it's generally not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a good point, right? You need to have the business involved, right? They need to be helping the implementation, optimizing the process flows. All of that has to be not done by IT in a silo. So,
yeah, I think it's
point.
even a step further. So the business needs to own that. It's a business strategy, and digital helps you to enable the business strategy, and that's why business needs to own it, in my point of view, right? So,
Great, thank you. We've got about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you very, very quickly to go down line. In 30 seconds, what's one practical next step you'd recommend that the audience here and listening to the podcast could take away and implement? And if we could start with you, please, Dave.
I think I mentioned it. Just to repeat, I would go back and look at your most important product and evaluate, could we implement a digital solution on this product? Where are the gaps? Paper to glass. If you're on paper batch records, you can move that quite quickly. So that's what I would do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, something similar really. Just from a CDMO perspective, I would say a practical next step, look at your 3 biggest issues in your 3 most important CDMOs, try and see what is the solution to that, and is digital a part of that? And if digital is a part of that, implement it first, get a quick win, and that'll start generating some momentum from a digitalization perspective.
Yeah, one thought we saw during the last 2 days, actually sometimes a little bit of a disconnect between sponsor expectation and CDMO priorities and so on. That's where I would start, right? So do we speak the same language? Do we have the same priorities? If it's about digital, then you can go there and select jointly what is the right target, right? And then jump in and just try to do it, right? And you will succeed.
Vishnu, take us home.
Yeah, as you're moving into the more of a digital organization, change management and adoption is going to be critical. So make sure it's not just, again, decisions made in silos, making sure that the entire organization is part of this journey to ensure that whatever you're implementing is adopted and used and leveraged to the fullest capability. We see a lot of times that things are implemented and no one uses it. So just make sure that everyone's involved as you're implementing or making decisions for the organization.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to our panel today. Excellent.
Thank you.
For more external manufacturing insights, head to cdmolive.com and download our 50-page summary of the event. Make sure to book your ticket for CDMO Live 2026, taking place the 27th to 28th of May at the World Trade Center, Rotterdam. We look forward to seeing you there.